All righty. Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome into the first Smash of 2025. He's Irish Raffel. My name is Tom Lang, and this is the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, who serves Noles and serves everybody, really, throughout the state of Florida, Georgia, Alabama. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But in 2025, Florida State's roster already looks really different than it did just about 3-4 weeks ago, and we're going to talk about that tonight. We'll also just be chatting about Florida State as a football program in 2025. It's just like a draft night in the NFL. Hope springs abound when the calendar changes from 1 month or 1 year to the next. Ira, how was your holiday? How was your birthday? Happy belated birthday! And how have things been since our last Smash a few weeks ago?
Thanks, man. Everything's great. Yeah, just like Florida State football, we're just focused on the future. We're looking ahead. We're not looking back much at 2024. And no, it was great. The kids were home. We had a good time. We didn't do anything crazy. It was just nice to be around family. And again, it was nice to kind of have plenty of good news for Florida State over the last few weeks. Really, I guess if you go back to the end of the regular season, it's been one steady flow of new coaches, new coordinators, new players, and a new season lies ahead.
In with the new across the board. You're right about that. There's the coaching changes, obviously, for Florida State. Then once you got to the Wednesday evening portion of the early signing period, Ira, through Friday with the high school players, Florida State with a lot of high-profile flips, a lot of good tidings, glad tidings around the holidays. Next thing you know, Juice Robinson says yes after Castellanos. You get some linebackers, defensive linemen, and 4 offensive linemen, and here we are, where we're looking at a 2-deep that is going to be radically different. Also philosophies that are going to be coached very differently in 2025. And, there's just a whole lot to sort through. So that's going to be the goal of tonight's program. If you have questions for Ira and I, please file those away in the chat. Michael Langston will be by in about 30 minutes or so to round out the program. So if you have questions about what's to come in the transfer portal, Florida State's ad drop ends on Thursday of this week. But certainly if there's a playoff contender, Ira, who has somebody enter the portal that Florida State is interested in, they'll make it work. They'll find room for the player to make his way to Tallahassee and get on campus. But just a broad question to start. Where Florida State has changed so much on offense or defense, what are you looking at first, and what has caught your eye about how Florida State has gone about the process and some of these new kids that have been brought in?
It's kind of been in 2 waves. That first wave was they went so hard on offensive linemen, and they did a really good job there. You bring in, basically 4 guys that could be starters, this upcoming season. And, I think that, you don't know for sure until we see what they look like. But, you're talking about some of these guys have played for, either played for Coach Hand before, or they're very familiar with them. They played with them or against them. So I think they've done their due diligence about what they're getting in those guys. And again, the difference between some of the transfers Florida State's taken the last 2 or 3 years on the offensive line, a lot of those guys were guys that really hadn't played a ton. Casey Roddick did, obviously at Colorado State when he came in. But even Dylan Gibbons was a guy who was a backup. They kind of hit it with him. He turned out to be a really good player, really solid offensive lineman. But they really didn't bring in as many guys with this much experience. So that's exciting on the offensive line. And then, more recently, it's been going and hitting, the defensive line, linebacker, skill positions on offense. Now we've got a really pretty proven tight end, really proven wide receiver in Squirrel White. So I think they've done a really good job of, addressing their needs and doing it with, it's guys that are legitimate players. Corey had a line in his column. He started his column today about this topic by saying Florida State needs, proven starters, not necessarily stars. And I think that's fair, but I think there might be some stars in this group. I mean, I think Deuce Robinson could be a star. Squirrel White looked like he was going to be a star till 2 years ago. And then last year he got injured. They've got some other pieces as well that I think could have star potential. So I'm really excited to see these guys in the spring, like you said, with a new coaching staff, kind of bringing it all together.
It's just so much new. A lot of times there's an overhaul out of the portal, so you're going to need the roster, just names and numbers to figure out who the kids are. That's certainly going to be the case this year, but new coaches as well on both sides of the ball, new philosophies, probably new methods to practice, I would think, at some point. Maybe not the walkthrough portions, and maybe not even acclimation days. But I would expect, Ira, that as we get into practice, 6 and 7 and 8 in spring camp, that you might start to see some things that are different. And then just to return to that offense for a second, looking at the offensive side of the football, if they add, let's just say, Rasul Faison, I know he announced his top 6 and Florida State is in his top 6, transfer running back out of Utah State. Let's just say he says yes to Florida State. No inside knowledge, just for the argument here. You've got 4 new starters on the offensive line. You've got 2 wide receivers that are new that are going to start for you. You got a new tight end, at least one that's going to start for you. And now Biscuit could be back in that rotation. You got a new quarterback, and you can have a new running back with a new offensive coordinator, new position coaches. I mean, my God, it's like its own little new program on that side of the ball. I know that there are some holdovers that they want to make sure get into the rotation and develop. But Ira, I mean, it's basically a new team that's going to be taking the field on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that I think would have really given me a lot of trepidation in the past because, okay, how quickly does it all come together? But I think what we saw this past year in college football, and I think we've been seeing it over the last few years, is I think the standard for what a really high-level great team is now is going to come down because all of these rosters are getting so much transition. I think, again, it's not a coincidence that an SMU was able to win the ACC this year. I did not think that was a great ACC. This was obviously not a great ACC. That wasn't a great SMU team. I think Florida State could have won that game if not for the Morlock play and kind of changing momentum there in the second half. So that's where you have to – you saw this year what you have to get to. Arizona State was a play or two away from going to the Final Four. And that's not to put down Arizona State, but they're exactly where Florida State is in terms of coming off of a 3-9 season a year ago. They brought in a ton of new transfers. All those guys, the key players, were new starters. And you could play well enough if you've got the talent, you've got a scheme, and it all plays out. You don't have injury problems, and you can maybe get in that run. So to me, that's where I think, again, some people will sit here and say, how sustainable is it? Are you going to be back in the same position a year from now, rebuilding again? I honestly think that's where college football is going to be. And so, you just give it a run. You put the pieces on the table and you give it a run and see where it goes. But I don't think it's a problem. If this team had to compete with the best college football teams in the 2010s or 2000s, they'd probably have a tough time making that transition. But the way it's going to be now, man, I think everybody's kind of in the same boat. Miami's going to be in the same boat. A lot of teams are going to be in the same boat.
Yeah, it's not quite as drastic, I don't think, but it's similar to pre-salary cap and then post-salary cap, NFL, right? Because you had dynasties. Yeah. When I was growing up in the early 90s, I caught the last wave of the non-salary cap era of the NFL, where in the NFC, it was empire building with San Francisco, empire building with Dallas. And it was who was going to acquire more great players. And Colorado's head coach Deion Sanders was at the forefront of that conversation towards the end of the non-salary cap era. After that, Ira, I mean, it's a cliche before they expanded to 17 games. It's a league where you're designed to go 8-8. I don't think it's the same way in college football, but it might be that college football at the high power level is a league that's designed, if you're going to go to the playoff, to go 10-2. And 10-2 feels a whole lot more attainable. Like to your point with what SMU did this year, Indiana did this year, 10-2 feels a whole lot more attainable than certainly running the table and going 12-0. If there were only 4 seats at the dance, or this is the BCS era where there's only 2 seats at the table for the whole thing, then you would feel eons away. But now that you're at 12 and soon to be 14 teams in this college football playoff, it feels like there's access here and a chance to feel good about yourself quicker than certainly you would about 4 or 5 seasons ago.
Yeah, and neither one of us is predicting that Florida State's going to be in the playoff hunt at all. But you just realize now how attainable is a great word. That none of that seems out of reach anymore.
Yep.
And for our perspective, for our purposes, I think where a lot of us are setting the bar for this season is, man, could you get back to 8-4, 7-5? Can you get back to just that ballpark and give yourself a chance in some of those other games, be competitive. Certainly this roster can do that. I don't have any doubts this roster can do that. I was talking to somebody with the program the other day, and this is not on the field coach, but somebody in the program who thinks that if they had Castellanos last year, that's probably 5 more wins. And I think that's probably true. They were so incapable of playing quarterback last year because of all of the other issues where a guy like Castellanos can negate a lot of those problems. So, and then you surround him with some better pieces, some more proven pieces. again, it's hard not to get excited. I know people are going to be like, pump the brakes. We're not getting too, and none of us are predicting 11 wins or 12 wins, but you certainly can see this roster, the way they built it now, competing with, the teams on their schedule, which is all you really need to do.
Yeah, it's somewhere between college basketball where it feels like you've got a totally new roster every single year and what college football used to be. I think there's a little bit of holdovers. And if you look at the defensive side of the ball, you can see that it's a little bit more apparent. The front six, I guess we have to call it now these days, Ira, if they're going to run that 3-3-5. Daryl Jackson is still an anchor in the middle. They've got some rotational defensive line pieces like Daniel Lyons, who had his moments this year, and KJ Sampson that have been a part of the equation, that probably will be a part of the equation again. At linebacker, you still have Omar Graham and Juice Cryer and Blake Nicholson, and we'll see if they factor in. But within that front six, there's a large overhaul, and it could just be that maybe only Daryl Jackson is among the starters in that group of the front six. Maybe not, but a huge overhaul there. Not so much in the secondary as yet, but a huge overhaul in the front six for FSU in the portal. And they brought in a lot of giant bodies too.
Yeah, and they're going to need a lot of them because, that is the one thing. And you said, if they run the 3-3-5, and that is what Tony White has run, what he ran at Nebraska, that's kind of where he seems to be going as a defensive coordinator. But you do wonder if Florida State has the personnel exactly to do what they want to do. And, one of those three linebackers is not like the others. At least at Nebraska, that third linebacker, the Jack, was an outside linebacker and was more like an edge rusher. A lot of times they also need to be able to play in space and do some other things. But, his guys that played that role last year at Nebraska were 6'4", 6'5", kind of, lanky defensive end types. Florida State doesn't have a plethora of those guys. Right. They've got a little bit more in terms of, I think the beefier defensive lineman that we find for the 3-man front. I'm a little curious about what's going to happen with that outside linebacker position. Because a lot of the linebackers you bring back are more of those inside linebackers. Florida State ran a 4-2-5. So basically you had maybe a Mike and a Will. You had like two inside linebackers, and they've got a lot of those guys. I don't know if they've got quite enough of the edge rusher types. James Williams looks very talented on paper. He was productive, but he also, there's probably a reason he only played 100 and something snaps. I mean, he was not an every down productive player. So, we'll see what it looks like, but that's probably the one position that I'm a little bit leery of. But otherwise, I mean, I think, I think they're very deep now at linebacker. I do think they've got a lot of options on the defensive line. And like you said, the back end, we were already excited about that back end. And I don't project them to, Michael, and he could talk about it later. I think he thinks there's a couple of DBs out there that Florida State would be interested in if they could land them because they're big time players, but it's not like, we've got to go get some DBs.
Yeah, I'd like to see better safety play this upcoming year, but then again, you got a new safeties coach. So, now specifically Evan Cooper will be coaching the safeties for Florida State defensively. The linebacker position's interesting. You brought it up today when you appeared on the Jeff Cameron show. You bring in three new guys, one of which is Stephon Thompson, who did play in the Nebraska scheme, which I think is really important, whether he starts or he doesn't, because the production wasn't like through the roof this past year at Nebraska, but experience in the system, the keys, the leverages, all that kind of stuff to be able to teach his teammates. I think that's critically important between him and Elijah Herring, and then the young Caleb Lavale kid from North Carolina who signed and was announced last Friday. You've got contenders now that if Omar Graham is not ready in a given week because he's had some injury trouble over the years, or Juice Cryer's coming back a little slowly from rehab, or Blake Nicholson still needs to acclimate to the system, you've got more options now. Right? It does feel like there's a little bit more of an insurance policy in that room. Even though they brought in Cam Riley last year, I never felt quite comfortable about that position. Am I crazy to feel like they might be better off this year, even though they're supposed to have three linebackers out there on every play in this new system?
Yeah, no, I think I definitely think you're right about those, especially those two more inside linebacker types, traditional linebackers for sure. And I think the neat thing about Stephon Thompson is he played a lot more the year before.
Yep.
Where I think they had him more as a little bit of an outside linebacker, and then this past year his reps got decreased, but he's played multiple positions in that defense. So to your point, he's a guy that's played a ton of football. He played for Tony White at Syracuse. He's been in that system I just feel like, the comfort level that Tatum Bethune brought when he came over and then played for Randy Shannon, the fact that Randy Shannon had recruited him to UCF, then he's coaching him at Florida State. Tatum Bethune was like a coach on the field. We talked about it those first practices when Tatum got here, that he was able to communicate and help other guys. And you saw that over his 2 years at Florida State. I think Stephon Thompson could be that kind of guy. Now, will he be as productive? I don't know. But just having another guy that knows the system is really big. And then, look, man, I am also interested to see how the linebackers play with a new defensive coordinator. I was not a Randy Shannon hater. I know a lot of people watching this were not Randy Shannon fans. I thought he was a good, solid coach. I didn't think he was a problem in terms of coaching the linebackers. I don't know that John Papuchis moving into linebackers coach is going to be some upgrade in terms of coaching. But from an overall scheme standpoint, I do like Tony White, the idea of him coming in and maybe getting more out of these guys in terms of how hard they play, how aggressive they play. Those are things I'm excited about because I felt like sometimes over the last few years, there were disconnects, I felt like, between Adam Fuller and the players. Now, 2023, you didn't see it that much, but there were definitely times over the last 4 or 5 years where I felt that. And I think Tony White may be a guy that can really kind of lock in, get some of these guys to play at a higher level.
Well, I think that's the thing we're just so excited about here when we get into spring practices, to just hear how they coach, watch how they coach, compare it. Because of the access we've had under Mike Norvell, I mean, we have so many data points. Ira, you've got hundreds, I guess, at this point of practices that you've seen in Mike Norvell's tenure at Florida State, and you can compare that apples to apples with what's going on next. And we'll document those differences for you on warchant.com. We look forward to doing that. We're going to take your questions in just a minute, but tonight's program, as always, is brought to you by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. Let's talk about our sponsor, who's back for another year with us here on Warchant TV. And if you live, whether you're a Nole or you're somebody who's just checking in to say, do they have a pulse in Tallahassee? Are they going to win 2 games again, or what's going on over there? If you have insurance needs, Russ Voorhis has got you covered. If you live in the state of Florida, the state of Georgia, the state of Alabama, he is, if you are a Nole, somebody that will talk to you at length about Florida State sports, because, Ira, he supports Florida State athletics top to bottom, just like he supported Warchant.com over the decades of its existence. If you like supporting Noles, he's your guy.
Yeah, I thought it was, kind of away from the business side of this. He's kind of part of the Warchant family. He sent that really nice text last week because you mentioned that he had a personal loss, and we've been thinking about him and his personal family, and he was touched by that. And again, this is kind of where a lot of our advertisers, are people that are kind of part of the Warchant family, and Russ is definitely one of those. I mean, he goes back with Gene years and years and years and years. And I've probably known him for over a decade, but Gene's known him longer than that. And like you said, big Nole, and clearly, has a successful insurance business in the Jacksonville area, but can service the tri-state area, and just a really good guy. And, again, as your plans or policies are coming up, just give him a call and see what they can do for you.
So we're going to take some questions now, general questions for Ira and I for the next 10 minutes or so, and then Michael will be by for portal questions. So if you have portal questions, hey, Michael, is that kid coming here? Like that kind of a question. What's the latest with this kid? I know I see some questions about a certain offensive lineman out of Alabama. File those away, and we'll answer those in the coming minutes. But Michael is the first question here. Michael Jennings, that is. Do we expect Hakeem Williams, Elijah Moore, and LaWayne McCoy to stay? You're not worried about B.J. Gibson too, Michael? I'm just going to throw his name out there as well. But Ira, I mean, they're going to be here for spring at the bare minimum, right?
And Cam Fryer, there's plenty of guys.
Oh, yeah, he was banged up last year. Yeah. Cam Fryer could make a difference.
He missed the season. He had a procedure before the season started and missed the season. I like him a lot. We'll have to see. It's a good sign, clearly, that they didn't jump in the portal as soon as the season was over. I think Hakeem was a guy particularly I was a little bit worried about. I think a lot of people were because of, he's obviously was a celebrated recruit. It has not gone the way he hoped it would go so far in terms of statistics. He's always had a good attitude, but you just kind of wondered how that would play out. Elijah Moore is much younger. LaWayne McCoy, those two guys came in last year, but Hakeem now has been at Florida State for 2 years, and it still hasn't really happened for him. Listen, man, I think, Hakeem, if he's, honest with himself, he can't blame Florida State for what he's done so far. He was very raw as a wide receiver coming out of high school. He was highly rated because he was big and strong and athletic, but he did not play at a sophisticated passing offense. He really was raw. Then he got the injury as a freshman, and then last year was a complete disaster for the offense. So, but I also think he needed to get better as a receiver. So to me, this spring is big for him because there's no doubt he's got the size and the athletic ability to be a factor in that offense. It's just a matter of being more productive and more consistent. And he's got a fresh start with a new receivers coach and a new offensive coordinator. And so I like to think that he's going to stay and contribute. The younger receivers, I mean, I feel like those guys, if they haven't left, if they didn't leave initially, I feel like they'll stay because again, they're basically just starting their careers. This is a great opportunity for them, I think if as long as things go well in the spring, I think there's a decent chance they stay. Now, maybe one leaves of that receiver group, but I don't think it's going to be an exodus. I think there's going to be plenty of balls to go around.
It's a credit to Florida State, though, to say we're not waiting. We don't have that luxury right now. We don't have time. And if they can bring in a third receiver, Michael talked about this the other day when we were doing the live portal show, they will bring in another receiver, which that's it's interesting, Ira, because Deuce Robinson comes in at 6'6", 220. Remember, before Deuce, there was Jordan Scott, the JUCO receiver that they brought in as well at 6'7", 215. So it's not as though Hakeem is typecast in this role of larger-bodied receiver and they're going to get a bunch of little guys like Squirrel White, who's more shifty. I mean, the challenge has been issued. The gauntlet has been thrown down here that we don't have time. So if you're not going to come up to speed, Florida State is okay with a kid departing if it doesn't work out for them by the actions that they're taking. At least that's the way I'm looking at it. If they bring in another receiver and you've got 3-4 guys that you bring in, you're willing to roll the dice and say if it doesn't work out for somebody that's already on the roster, it's just not going to work out.
Well, and they have to do that because, again, nobody has, especially that position, nobody has proven anything. Malik Benson was a guy who, when they found out he was going to have another year of eligibility, a lot of people wondered, would he stay? And same deal, man. There's no guarantee he would get on the field. If it's not like he's locked anything up based on what he did last season. Destin Hill, I thought was a big loss. It would have been nice to keep Destin Hill for the potential. I think he's got the potential when healthy to be a really nice player, but you can't just wait on that. I mean, they have to win this year. They have to be productive this year after what happened last year. So, yeah, to your point, man, they had no choice. They had to go get as many proven guys as they can.
Wes from the Villages, what's up? Wesley Todd says hello to us, and he says, will this be the last Smash until spring? Keep up the great work. Can't wait for player interviews. No, it won't be the last Smash until spring ball. I don't know that we'll be every single week until then, but there's a lot of news still coming out, Ira. I imagine we're going to get together fairly regularly here on Mondays between now and spring ball.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty going on. And then, we're going to have, I assume in February, we'll have a tour of duty to cover at some point. We'll also be getting more opportunities to talk to these coaches. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll be talking plenty over the next couple of months.
Great. Thanks, Wes. We're happy you're back for 2025. Dave asks, who are considered to be the leaders of this portal class? I like this question because you can go a lot of ways with this. Like, to me, my first inclination, Ira, is to say, well, what kids came in from UCF and what kids came in from Nebraska, because they're going to help with the transition team, if you will. That's a good term right now in January of a post-election year. But they're kind of like the transition team who can help translate what coaches are expecting for their teammates. But, I mean, other than that, maybe you look at a Gunnar Hansen at left tackle. Of course, Thomas Castellanos, who's been instrumental in some of these recruitments. But any names that stand out to you that you expect to be leaders? Do you want to see more information with these newcomer interviews? How do you stand on that question?
Well, I mean, I think it definitely starts with Castellanos. I think he's going to be the alpha of that group. And again, it's not just because he played a lot at Boston College and had some success. That is his personality. And that's something Florida State, we'll probably write about this in the spring and the fall, but Florida State really hasn't had that alpha personality of quarterback, honestly, in terms of like a capable quarterback, probably since Jameis. Because Jordan, as great as Jordan was, Jordan's play spoke for himself. And that's what got guys to rally around Jordan. Once they realized, oh, this dude's really good, guys really rallied around him. Before then, they liked him, but it wasn't like, oh, Jordan's the clear leader. He's not that big personality. Thomas Castellanos, going back to when he was in high school, has always been a big personality guy. So he's going to be the natural leader, especially as a quarterback, and the fact that he's going to be clearly the guy with Gus Malzahn running the show in that offense. But, there's a couple things I thought were interesting. the football team came to the basketball game. The newcomers came to the FSU basketball game on Saturday, and it was interesting to me. Castellanos went down and sat in the front row. A bunch of the players, basically, they took a section where they had a bunch of tickets for the newcomers and their families, and Castellanos went and sat down the front row by himself. Deuce and Randy Pittman, the tight end, went down and sat next to him. Very much felt like, okay, he's our guy. We need to go sit with our quarterback. And then as talking to some people who were around the team, they said that they saw some signs of when position groups or players were walking around, people could already see some leadership in some of these new guys, just in how they carry themselves, getting onto other guys if they were goofing off or not representing themselves the way they needed to. So I think that is something they've got in this group. That was another thing. It was kind of an unwritten thing or unspoken thing about that group that they brought in last year. There were not a lot of leaders in that group that they brought in last year. I don't know if it's on purpose or if it's just worked out that way, but it seems like from what I'm hearing, there's some leadership qualities in this group of transfers.
Yeah, that'd be the one thing I take with me. Well, many things I take with me from 2024, the lessons, is I thought, man, it's kind of quiet out here when I was watching practices in camp. I thought a victory or two would help sort that out. Right. You need to have that earlier on in the process. So lesson learned on that one. King Spleen asks, good evening. Good evening, King Spleen. Do you guys think Norvell will have a larger say-so in the offense than people think? Meaning, will our offense be more balanced than what we've seen from Gus over the years? I like this question. It's coming up a lot. I don't think Mike Norvell is going to be flipping over on the headset saying, hey, Gus, throw it more in the course of a game. But I'm not sure, Ira. I mean, Coach Bowden had his ways where he would find his way to take over and wrangle play calling duties. There's some famous stories about that. What do you think? Gus Malzahn's offense from head to toe or something in between?
I think it's going to be Gus Malzahn's offense. But I would say this, that subplot is going to be interesting to follow over the course of this year because neither of these guys have been in this position in a long, long time. Mike Norvell, even when he wasn't calling plays, when he had Kenny Dillingham here calling plays, or I think at Memphis he had maybe some other guys call plays, it's always been Mike Norvell's offense. Since he's been a coordinator over a decade now, it's been his offense. Gus Malzahn has been a head coach now for a long time. So he's got to call all the shots he wants to call. How they work together, I think, is going to be really interesting. Now, everybody's taken it as a given because they've gone back to Mike's Norvell's days as a GA under Gus Malzahn, and they've known each other for 15, 20 years. And I'm sure that gives them a great chance for this to work out. But that is going to be something to watch over the course of the season. Does Mike interject? How does Gus handle that? Does Gus even ask questions, or does he just do what he wants to do because he's been in this position to do it? So that's going to be fun to watch. But if you were just asking me what it's going to be, I think it's going to be Gus Malzahn's offense.
If they're looking for money for the university to be able to fund everything they want to, they should sell passes to the coaches' headsets for the season. Right. Per game, $400, $500 a game, or however many thousand for the season. I'd pay. I really want to hear how those conversations go. I'm such a nerd for that kind of stuff. A couple more questions here. Get down or lay down. What are you looking forward to for spring ball? I want to see if Coach Hand is making the offensive line play physically in practice and force their will on defense. Going to spring practices and just watching what they do, how they coach, station to station, do the periods look different than they used to? Ira, I can't wait to document and see all of that. That's going to be a fun story to tell.
100%. I was just talking to a couple of the other sports writers on the beat the other day about that topic because football practice, and a lot of people watching this have played football, so you've been through football practice, or you've seen it, or your kids did, or whatever. And football practices can be very mundane because a lot of times it's the same drills over and over and over, and it's all about technique and execution, and they can be very mundane, especially when you're losing. And I felt like some of the drills Florida State's done, we can argue whether or not they do great drills or not, or they could do better drills, but I felt like they were very stale, especially for a team that was losing. So that's right off the bat. I want to see if there's some new drills that will kind of go along with it, because you can do a lot of different drills to emphasize the same things. I'm curious to see if they bring in some new drills to just kind of go with the feeling of, man, this is a fresh start. Forget what happened in the past. Forget that staff. Forget those games. We're moving in a new direction. And then also to the bigger point is to this question, do they play? Do plays go further than basically the initial contact, which it feels like most of the plays we watch, it's the initial collision on the line of scrimmage, the back hits the hole, whistle blown, and it's kind of over. One comment I heard this past season, I can't remember, and I'm not trying to hold up Miami as any symbol of greatness or how to run a program, because obviously they fell way short of expectations. But they had a couple plays this season. One of them I think might have been against Florida State, where they pushed the pile to get a big first down. And when I was listening afterwards to the quarterback and the running back talking about it, they talked about how they actually practice that. In practice, they'll work on the offensive lineman coming behind and shoving the pile to get those extra yards. Florida State rarely does that. And as you think about it, it's like, yeah, Florida State never gets to that point of a play.
Right.
Like there's not that elongated battle where you would have that play out. So that's the kind of thing. I mean, again, I'm not sitting here telling you that I can coach better than Mike Norvell or I know how to design a practice, but it feels like, after what we saw last season, you need more game type situations and more just competition from a physicality standpoint. I feel like that you probably feel the same way.
I do. It also would react to the way the ACC officials look at forward progress,
which just never stops.
It just never ends. The play's never over. So you probably want to work on that, because they'll just keep the whistle in their hand. They got nothing better to do. Last question here before we take a break and get to some specific portal questions is from Florida man in Alabama, and he wants to know something from you, Ira. He wants to know, what's your football prediction in 2025? Is it early success? Or arguing with rabid fans on X complaining about media predictions? Where do you think this year's going to go?
I think it's here's the thing. No matter what we predict, people are going to act like we predicted that they were going to go undefeated. Because last year, none of us, I don't know anybody that predicted that this team was going to waltz into the playoff, compete for a national championship, and go undefeated. I think most of us thought, with the schedule and with the talent they had accumulated and with young guys getting better, it could be a team that wins 9 or 10 games. It could maybe be a team that wins 8 games. But you also felt like there were some losable games that had you a little bit concerned. But when the team looks bad, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you guys said they were going to be awesome. I don't know how many people in the media that said that. So I'm not too worried about what people are going to say about our predictions, because they're just going to assume we said they were going to be awesome. I'm going to predict that. I mean, I think based on what we've seen so far, I think I'll end up predicting they're going to win 8 or 9 games. I just like the talent they brought in. I think there's 2 for sure wins in Kent State and East Texas A&M. Is that their name now? Texas Commerce. I think those are 2 sure wins. When you look at the rest of the schedule, that gives you 10 more games. I think they'll win 6 of those 10, maybe 7 of those 10. Can you get into the playoffs? Everything would have to go right. Castellanos would have to be just outstanding, play better than he has to this point. And the defense would have to take a big step as well. But I think unless something changes dramatically in the next few months, I'll be predicting, 8-4, 9-3 probably on the high end.
I'll cop to it. I had us, I think, at 11 in the last W's and L's, but it's just because the schedule laid out so well. I was very clear to say that team was not as good as its predecessor. For the first time in Mike Norvell's tenure in Tallahassee, the team he currently had was not as good as the previous one. But then, they laid an egg in Dublin, and it got worse against Boston College, and then they were kind of they were out here.
Well, and I think that's an important part. I mean, I think even the people that said 10-2 or 11-1 or any in that ballpark, it was mostly because you looked at the competition they'd be playing and thinking, okay, well, those teams aren't going to be great. And it turns out we were right. Georgia Tech ended up being about a 500 team. BC was about a 500 team. SMU basically got fat on a bad ACC. Yep. There were not great teams on that schedule. And if things had gone better in the first 6, 7, 8 games, I think you probably beat Florida at home at the end of the year. So it's just things snowballed on them. But yeah, the predictions, I never felt like any of us were saying, man, this team's going to be awesome. It's just compared to who they were playing on their schedule, you thought, they could compete to get back in the playoff.
You will be in studio tomorrow at 1:00 for Seminole Headlines. Good sir. Anything you want to promote on warchant.com coming up or already on the front page at warchant.com?
Yeah, no, just we'll have more coverage kind of now we're kind of looking ahead from portal season. There's still a few guys out there that they're going to try to get. Michael can talk to everybody about that. There's a breakdown of that on the site as well by Michael, remaining portal targets, but then we'll be taking the next step now, like, looking at these positions. What do these positions look like now with the players? We know who stayed for Florida State. We know who left, but we know who stayed. We know who's coming in from a freshman standpoint. And then we know who these transfers are, so you can start to get a feel for these depth charts at all these positions. So I think the first one I'll be doing is on linebackers for tomorrow, and but we'll be doing those over the next couple weeks.
Linebackers. I'm so looking forward to seeing how they're coached and just that group getting out there working around, because at 3-3-5, you're supposed to swarm to the football, Ira. I think we'd all like to see some swarming to the football. Really appreciate getting back in the saddle with you in 2025, and I'll see you on some sort of company text here soon. Thanks, brother.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tom.
We'll be back in 15 seconds with Michael Langston here on Warchant TV.
Contact Russ Voris for an auto quote today.
All right, there he is. We were together yesterday for the better part of an hour recording a few videos. You might have seen them here on Warchant TV. If you haven't, reaction to Squirrel White's commitment last night, linebackers that came in, defensive linemen that Florida State announced, 2 of each position over the weekend. He is Michael Langston, senior recruiting analyst, senior portal analyst. How goes it on a Monday night for you, sir?
Pretty good. It's kind of cold. Tallahassee is going to get cold tonight. If you're in Tallahassee, dress warm, but away we go again. And no, I'm doing well, man. A lot of stuff going on.
Yes, there is. I'm going to ask about a specific running back in a moment, but Polk County Noel has been asking this question on many of our shows. And Polk, I see you, but this is the guy who can answer that question. So now, Pritchett from Alabama, we barely missed on him out of high school. Florida State has 4 offensive linemen that are already signed, sealed, and delivered.
Yeah.
Do you think Florida State could get involved here with this particular player, Michael?
I don't see that happening. Most of the connection there was with Alex Atkins. I think he's going to go to Nebraska from everything I've heard, and the trending. It's kind of trending that way. I think there was a connection with the coach that he has that they have a previous history. So I think he'll probably end up at Nebraska. I've not heard anything about FSU. Just want to get it short and sweet and knock it out of the park. That's kind of where Elijah Pritchett's situation is.
Well, sorry, Polk County Noel. I wish it was a yes for you. You've been asking that question. Rasul Faison, Florida State, is in his top 6.
Yeah.
I believe Georgia's in his top 6, and is North Carolina in his top 6?
Yeah.
I think those are 2 that I saw.
Yeah.
Are those the 2 main contenders against Florida State? What are you hearing in that particular recruitment?
I mean, particularly everybody that he visited, you have to consider them a contender. I mean, he visited Utah, North Carolina, Alabama, FSU. Will still circle back to the one with FSU where all those other ones felt like 1-day visits. The FSU was like 2 full days, maybe even 2.5 if you want to stretch it. And none of those places, not to tout me or our media for FSU, but were the only place that interviewed him that he talked to, is willing to talk. And not that tells you everything all the time, but just overall, I think the minimum has been with FSU. Now you have to wait and see. Belichick's now at North Carolina. You don't know if he might highlight whatever the running game could be, but I think overall he's got 1 year left. So I think he wants to be at a place that, he feels pretty comfortable with. And you add all the tea leaves together of just the visits and, what connects and what doesn't. I mean, FSU seems to be the one that makes a lot of sense of kind of what he's looking for. And I always say, in high school recruiting, the last visit is probably the most important, where I think in portal sometimes, or majority of time, in my experience, is that first visit is a really big deal for a lot of portal kids. And I think FSU got that first visit. And I'm not predicting that. I don't know for sure. For people wonder, I do not know for sure that he's going. I haven't put an RPM pick for FSU, but if I was making a pick, I mean, that's probably where I would lean, just on FSU and what I know with the recruitment.
So I would imagine that decision has to come down here in the next couple of days, because Florida State's ad drop is Thursday.
Right.
I don't know. Is he publicizing that, or is that just going to be, it could happen like all these other things are, just any moment?
I just think it's going to be either Monday night or Tuesday, I would think, where you see a decision. I know it's Monday night already, but probably Tuesday or sometime in the Tuesday realm. I think he hasn't said exactly, "Hey, I'm doing it," but he did mention it a couple days he would be doing it. So I think really usually when you see a top six, when a guy reveals kind of a top six like he did with Hayes Fawcett, that's kind of where they're in decision mode, where they know where they're going and they're edited and organized the right way of what they want, and then all that stuff, and then bam, the decision comes probably a day later or so. That's usually how it works in my experience.
Yeah, if he's contacting Hayes to do a top six edit, that probably means he's like, all right, here's the 2 or 3 that you're actually going to have to put together, Hayes, for me
Yeah,
for the announcement time. So that's Rasul Faison, running back again. Florida State is looking for another bell cow. The way that Gus loves to run the football, you're obviously you're intrigued if you're a running back who's in the portal and Florida State says, yes, we're interested in you. Looking at some of these ratios over the years, Michael, I mean, you're talking about 3-to-1 ratio runs to pass. So there'll be a lot of that going around this upcoming year. Just any other developments that you see? We'll get to a little bit of recruiting here probably before the hour's up, but any more developments you could potentially see between now and Thursday? Because I know the coaches hit the road today. Some of them did for actual high school recruiting.
Right.
Could they possibly host somebody between now and Thursday?
They could, probably wouldn't be. It would probably, if it's not by Tuesday, I was told, like, if it doesn't happen by Tuesday for a visit, it's probably not happening. I know some kids are taking visits on Tuesday and Wednesday. I think there's a few kids out there like Caden Robinson, the Appalachian State wide receiver. He's a possibility. I think he's visiting West Coast teams right now. And then you also have DeMarcus Cooley out of NC State. That's top safety. That's talented, visiting LSU, Kentucky. Will FSU get one? We'll see. But I haven't been told of a visit yet that's lined up. I know they're talking to those two young men. I know that's going on. But outside of that, those would really be the only two, Tom, that I could really circle that, okay, those are guys that I think if there's a visit, that it would be one of those two. Naturally, you could see an edge guy. Damon Wilson just entered the portal from Georgia. That's one that raised my eyebrows on, because that's one that I know previously FSU has a connection with out of Venice High School, in-state kid. Certainly one that I feel like 3 sacks, the pressures are what you want to get that fifth spot and final spot for that edge position. So that's one I'm kind of checking on to see how that materializes with that interest. I think that's one that they would probably be interested in, and maybe you see a visit quickly. I don't know. But those three are really the only ones for me, Tom, of visiting, because I think, you mentioned the coaches on the road. By the way, side note, both Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell went to see Brady Smigel today for a visit to check on him. I think that's a very important note in meeting, because I think they've talked. He's talked with Gus, but to see him in person, and for those that hadn't really captured it, Gus won't be on the road a lot. So to make that move to go over there, meet with the family, meet with Brady, I think it signifies kind of where they're at. That they want to make sure he knows he's prioritized in this class. I'm working to get up with Brady on maybe a Q&A or something. But overall, I thought that was one of the most important stops that I'd heard. We put a bunch of stops on the board, by the way, for the different coaches that are going different places for high school kids. But I wanted to make sure I make note of that, since I think a lot of people might not have realized that was going on.
That's a big deal. You're right, because it's a new set of eyes, a new offensive coordinator. And if Gus said thumbs down on Brady, then it would have been, I'm not going to go hit the road to reaffirm that even though we've got a new offense, we want you. Very, very interesting there. Get down or lay down. This is a general portal question. From now until fall kickoff, do we gain or lose more players on the roster? That's an interesting one. What do you think, Michael?
You got the wrong person on here asking that question too. That's more of an Iowa question, or maybe FSU 91. He's good at those scholarship numbers and stuff, but I don't know. Get down on me. I really don't know. I don't think there'll be a large retention. I mean, I think we've seen. I think they have 16 now. I think at one point there was around 13 or 14 that they lost. So I think they've made gains on what they do, and I think it'll be kind of the similar way when they do it in the spring. Once they're done, you could see some subtractions, and then think they'll make up the differences with the additions. I think that's my best answer for that, because I don't know how many or what they are, but that's the kind of the cycle I've seen of the way they've operated this situation, where they want to replace what they lost. And and they've shown that with the positions. You got 4 edge guys, you got 4 offensive linemen. They certainly lost several there, and then at the receiver position, they're certainly loading up on that position to get experienced guys to kind of match to be able to run this new system with Gus Malzahn.
That's a good point. So let me ask it this way, because you're right. Like if they lose more kids out of spring, they're not happy with the depth chart or whatever, then they're going to, by definition, take more to backfill
Right.
those kids departing. So if they didn't lose anybody, nobody leaves at any position from here until the spring window closes, how many more do you think they add? They're at 16, like 4 or 5 more? What do you think?
I think even maybe it might even go less than that, than 4. But I think you're looking at, you'd like to get another tackle, offensive tackle. I think if you can get a defensive tackle, and that probably falls in the best available category. Certainly, if they don't add another receiver, then I think you would add another receiver. And then I think they would like to get another edge. So that equals kind of your 4. So, yeah, I don't see it going beyond 4. Personally, if you don't lose anything else and you feel like everything's kosher and it's good, and the roster's kind of close to what you want. And I told Tom this last night. I'm really shocked that they got so close to meeting everything that they wanted. There wasn't far off, and I think that speaks a lot, and that's a big positive that I don't think it's talked about enough, because the guys in the spring are the ones that you're beginning the battle with. So you want to have majority of your guys. Sure, you can throw a sprinkle in of 2 or 3 or 4 in there, but you don't want to have a major group where you're taking 9 or 10 in the spring. So I think they accomplished that plan. But yeah, I think it'd probably be 3 or 4.
It's a good. Yeah, I was going to say, you weren't kidding when you said they're almost done. Yeah, if that's only it, then they're
Yeah.
pretty much almost done. Wayne on Facebook is asking the question: any idea if we're going to go after another quarterback?
No, simple. They're not going after another quarterback. I think Ira really established everything. By the way, I think some YouTubers said I had a problem announcing Thomas's last name wrong. Castellanelis. How is that close?
Castellanos. Yeah.
Castellanos, excuse
Yep.
me.
Yeah.
Castellanos. So I want to make sure I get it right. I've known TC for a long time, back in his days with Ware County, the Ware County Gators, ironically. Really great kid. And I think Ira's talked about the different personalities, but I think with him, his personality is going to be more infectious than
Yep.
the previous guys he's had there, even going back all the way to Jordan, because Jordan was more, and Jordan was a really cool cat, but he was more like just the play set the stone, because I remember sitting in the Doak Campbell in the spring game with another recruit, and they're like, who's this 13? This guy's terrible. Like, and so it took a while for Jordan to really establish his brand. And then once he did, you saw the confidence exude, where Thomas has always been like that. Tommy's even is more open and without with that personality. I think that showed with the point you talked about, where he went down there to the basketball game. All the other guys, some other guys came down there and sat with him. He exudes that, but it's because of he's very confident, but he's also he has he's like a magnet of guys wanting to be around him, and he's always said that. And I think when he was coming down and they introduced him, he was the first one to lead them all in there. So I think that is the thing that I think will people will take notice of just the leadership and the way he is. I think James Williams, another one that I sense leadership when I look at that guy and I listen to him and his exit interviews when I talk to him. Now we're still going to meet these guys and they're going to talk to the media, as a grand whole. But I was very taken away and impressed with what James said about helping lead the other young or the defensive linemen. I think that says a lot of what you want, because one of my biggest issues with this team last year was the leadership was just really poor. Just there wasn't much, and the guys that you thought were leaders, they weren't there. So I think that's a big thing with this group, and I think you can tell that with the guys they've added.
We know the one story about the portal stuff. Florida State was on Deuce Robinson early, but
Yeah.
TC was a big part of that. He was a
Yeah.
huge part of the contact.
And Squirrel. He was very involved with Squirrel. Squirrel talked about him. He was around him a lot, and that's infectious, man. When you have a guy that is invested in FSU, and that was one of my pushes that I wanted Thomas, where other one's like, no, we don't want that guy. Like he's whatever. But my big thing with Thomas is he grew up wanting to play for FSU. That's his dream school. You have to have players that are invested in what you're doing. That's no shot to DJ last year when they recruited him. He felt like the option was good, but to me, an investment with your quarterback and having a guy that brings out infectious personalities in other players is really a big deal. So yeah, he was really big in a lot of these recruitments.
Let's see. Funny question followed by one more serious question. What's a better
Okay.
What's a better nickname, Squirrel or Biscuit? Or I'll even throw Pot Roast in there as a wild card. Which one do you like the most?
I'm not gonna put pot roast in there because just I don't want him coming after me because he's a tough guy. But uh, I love biscuit. I'm gonna go with squirrel because one, my wife loves it the best, but two, just how many there hasn't been anybody even close to a nickname to squirrel, and I just love that nickname. It's just awesome. I've gotten these different avatars that people have sent me with squirrels and FSU uniforms and stuff like that. So it's just more, I think, dramatic, and it's going to be a very popular one. Although he doesn't have a nickname, I think Deuce will be another one that's popular. You can imagine the amount of Deuce cheers you're going to see at the
Yep.
game
Yep.
with him playing. So yeah, squirrels the way I would go.
Yeah, I agree there. All I hear is in the Water Boy, Kathy Bates. What are we having
Yeah.
for dessert? Bzz, squirrel. Mo asks the question, the last one of the night. The offensive line, 4 to
Yes.
5 players. Is that enough? What do you think, Michael?
I did. I think it's enough. I think if I mean, that's the thing too, is it's not just the four. You're getting four starters. So when you get four starters and really productive guys, to me, that kind of lessens the number of what I think you get five. I would like to see one more.
Yep.
Yeah, if you could throw a six in there, great. But you also don't want to overload this roster where you have some guys that you feel like, hey, these guys can help us. Maybe ones that you haven't seen, like a Lucas Simmons or somebody like that, that you don't want to detriment their your development by just getting greedy and taking over what you really need. I think five is it puts them in a really good spot. So five for me.
Yeah, I agree. This is something we talked about in the JCS today, Michael. Like now you've slotted so many of these players back down the depth chart.
Yeah.
And they're allowed to develop without that pressure of having to be the answer. I think that's better for development, is if these kids don't feel that extra weight that they have to be an answer, they can grow at their own speed. And also, I think that speeds up the development because it adds competition.
Yeah.
Now, on the on the recruiting trail, things are changing and coming fast there because the coaches are now hitting the road. They're going to make their visits. All the new coordinators and position coaches are out there. They're working very, very hard. And they're all setting up towards junior days and events here on campus. Like, just give me a broad idea of what we can expect over the next month from Florida State as high school recruiting replaces portal work.
Yeah, I think you transfer over to obviously 2026. There'll be a few 2025s in there. Tonio Cromartie Jr. is coming over for a visit on January 18th that weekend. Obviously, I feel good about that recruitment. I think the tweets pretty much spoke for himself of the excitement level that Tony got when his kid got an offer, and then and they've been consistently coming to FSU. So sometimes it's really good when you get Christmas present. That's one that I feel like you'll see in there. But I think the main takeaway is I want to see kind of what the feeling is with these coaches when they're around these coaches, these FSU staff that come in there, and just the connection that they have with a lot of these high school coaches, and then to the high school prospects. Because I'm particularly intrigued by the most is Herb Hand, because I want to see there's such a strong history of development with his history. When you look at what he does, I want to see just how much that really gives FSU a big amount of juice compared to the other teams. And also I'm interested to see what they do in South Florida. You got 3 or 4 guys now on the staff that are really tight in South Florida. Tim Harris Jr., Evan Cooper's really good there. Tony White's very good there. Terrence has some connections as well to the South Florida area. So I want to see what they do in that South Florida area in this next 2026 cycle, which kind of leads me to the segue of my hot board coming up. I've been working on.
Nice.
I can honestly tell you guys I'm through about almost all the offense. There's a few things I got to trickle up, but I'll start work on the defense. But overall, and I will tell people straightforward, Tom, or straightforward. I'm almost flying blind here because a lot of the stuff I'm doing, I'm basing on intel and research and digging of guys that I feel like would connect or have a connection with either Terrence Knighton, Evan Cooper, or Herb Hand, that that maybe there's a history there, or I've heard behind the scenes this is a guy to watch. So a lot of this is flying blind. Some of it's a little more easier when you talk about the quarterback position and just positions of the guys that have been here. So it's a lot going on with that coming up. So I've been really working heavily on that. But yeah, those are kind of my keys for the 2026 of cycle of those are things I want to see about this new staff. And two, just when they have that big January 18th junior day, I want to see kind of what the vibes and the feelings are. Not so much the commits. That's great if you get some, but most kids commit like 2 or 3 times. So I don't really, you want to put too much excitement in that, but I just want to see the reaction of how much juice it really brings with that group and that staff, and just the way they connect with recruits compared to what we've dealt with previously.
For all the latest intel, there it is, everybody. If you
There you
haven't
go.
subscribed to warchant.com, head over now. You get 7 days of access to warchant.com for just $1. And if you say, I like it here, this is pretty cool, then you get half off an annual membership. This is for new signups only at warchant.com. We call it the 150 special. Choose the annual plan when you go to warchant.com, and you'll see the breakout of exactly what I'm talking about. $1 for 7 days of access. Join the largest FSU fan community in the business. And if you're already a member, by all means, join Warchant Gold and upgrade your experience. It's ad-free, and we will give you greater discounts so the membership pays for itself. A $20 gift code to Garnet and Gold when you upgrade from your Warchant plan to Warchant Gold. And then instead of 10% off all Garnet and Gold purchases, you get 15% off all Garnet and Gold purchases for the entirety of your membership, the length of your membership with Warchant and Warchant Gold. Please join us today. You'll see what all the fun's about and why people are always here on Warchant TV, Michael, because they have so much fun over there. They decided to come over here and chat it up with us. Before we sign off tonight, before the NFL playoffs begin, give me your pick to win the Super Bowl. Who's Michael's pick to win the Super Bowl this year?
I'm not going against the Chiefs. I think it's going to be the Chiefs and the Lions. I'm sorry if there's some I know you're listening. I know you're in the background watching. Sorry. I think the Lions are the best team, but I just can't go against that guy when he gets to the Super Bowl. I just think he's different. So I think it's going to be Chiefs and the Lions, but I think the Chiefs are somehow going to control the game and they'll pull it out.
Get down or lay down. If that happens, if the Buccaneers win the whole thing, I will.
Oh gosh!
I will sign on to Warchant TV with nobody's permission. It'll be 1 a.m, and we'll go live, and I will be in Happyville, USA. But I don't think
that would be awesome.
If we get a Chiefs-Lions Super Bowl, I think many in the world would be happy with that. Everybody wants to root for Detroit in the Super Bowl right now. We'll see.
Yeah, they do.
We'll see if it all happens. We'll document so much more on warchant.com and Warchant TV. Make sure to hit the like button underneath the video here. Subscribe to the channel. It's always free, and it populates on your home screen when you head over to YouTube. If you want the latest FSU information, it's just one click away. We appreciate your support. We also appreciate, as always, Michael, State Farm Agent Russ Voorhis. He's the man. He supported warchant.com for a long, long time. And as always, thank you for your time tonight, sir. I know that's very, very busy. There's no sleep for the portal/recruiting coverer like you are, but we appreciate you making time for us tonight.
Absolutely. I can't echo that even more about Russ. If you need a State Farm insurance or just insurance in general, guys, that's the guy to go. Great guy, great just a great person overall. But we thank you guys. Hit the like button. It's been my pleasure. Hopefully we'll give you some more good news coming up soon, the next day or so, but we'll see.
If there is good news, you'll find it here on Warchant TV. Thanks to director Ben Spicer behind the scenes, and of course Irish O'Fell for being the man for the first 2/3 of the show. All right, everybody, we'll see you tomorrow on Warchant TV. Wake up Warchant first thing in the morning, I think, but I know for sure that we've got Seminole headlines at 1 o'clock. Stay tuned for all that here on Warchant TV, and we will talk to you all next time.